You directed Mason's Rats for season 3 of Love, Death and Robots. How did that project come about?
So that was one of those where a relationship paid huge dividends. To track it all the way back, when I moved down to LA, I remember I'd gotten my first agent, but I didn't have a manager. He wanted to put me in contact with somebody that he knew that was a manager down here. So he put me in contact with my current manager, his name is Tarek Heitman. And so I formed a relationship with Tarek, and we started working together, and Tarek put me in touch with one of his other clients, which is Axis Animation in Scotland. And so while I was sort of like reworking the fabric of my career down in Los Angeles, transitioning from commercial more into entertainment, I started working with Axis a lot on game cinematics in order to survive, and pay some bills. And not that I don't love game cinematics, I think they're phenomenal. But it was one of those things that has sort of a shorter timeline than longer format stuff. And you don't have to go through the typical process of development to get one of these cinematics done, right? Like Axis gets called for cinematic, they call me as a director, I pitch on it. 2 weeks later, you're in production and you're moving rather than toiling away for 5 years in development on something. So I'd done a bunch of game cinematics with Axis, and then they called last, I think it was August or September. I got a call from them and they said they'd already done 2 Love, Death and Robots episodes. They did one on each of the first 2 seasons. They did Helping Hand on the first season, and then they did The Tall Grass on the second season. So they'd become sort of a preferred vendor, I suppose, for Tim Miller and Blur, because they knew that they had stylistic range and they had the team to pull it off potentially in a short timeline, which it really was. Because I got this call in August or September. They asked me to pitch on it. I had very little time. So I basically slapped together a pitch. This is one of those occasions that I was mentioning or referring to earlier where I had very little time. I had like a day and a half to put this pitch together. Typically in the past, at one of these other studios, I would have hired some artists and some board artists, and I would have done some storyboards, and I would have done a whole song and dance to try to win a project like this. But I just didn't have the time. So I just used reference as much as I could. I felt like I had an opinion about it. I couldn't second guess it. So I just slapped it all together, and I felt it came very naturally. We'll put it that way. It came out very naturally. And I also was inspired by my grandpa. So I had a really good through line into the tone of what I wanted it to be. And shipped the pitch off, and sure enough, I got a call back from him. I was actually in Mammoth on a little vacation with my 3-month-old at the time. Wow. And I ended up having to, the hotel internet was terrible. So I had to go and rent they had this little WeWork space in Mammoth. And I went in there to take the call with Tim and Jen and Jed and Victoria all for the first time. It was sort of strange. And yeah, I could tell on the very first call that they liked my pitch enough that I was probably going to get the job.
You could tell from Jed's amazing charisma. I swear, I feel like I win whenever he smiles because it's so rare.
Yeah, absolutely. I could tell a lot of it was Tim too, though, because Tim was kind of excited and
you could count the F-bombs he threw to validate the prototype.
Yeah, right, exactly. The crazy thing was that Tim was like, I just want to know, you're fucked because you only have 6 months. This thing from start to finish. And I was like, holy shit. All right, well, I've been fucked before, so I could do that. I'm used to it.
That's cool. And I guess what was the experience like working with Axis as well as working with Tim and Blur? Yeah, what were some of the big challenges on creating the project in the 6-month turnaround? Every
project is its own puzzle to solve, in whatever way, because there's always various relationships and different hierarchies of studios or agencies or whatever. So it's always a matter of managing all sides, all the way through the process. And this one, I wouldn't say it was sort of remarkably unique in any respect, but what I did find very interesting about it, and a really fun challenge, is that ultimately the show lives and breathes on the variety of what's in it, of giving different directors their own opportunity to share their voice or their vision, whatever it may be, stylistically, and all those things into the series. And what's really fascinating, I don't know if that many people can quite just watching the series fully recognize this from a distance, but is that although there's all these styles, they're all connected by a very specific tone. And so even though you're sort of thrown out here to go do your own thing, you also have to make sure that you're doing your own thing, but that it then lives in the tone of the rest of the series. And so that dichotomy is I mean, obviously that's what Tim and Jen and Jed are all there to help with, you know, to when all these directors are out doing their own things, they're all there to make sure that they end up fitting stylistically, tonally into that family that is Love, Death, and Robots. And so I found, you know, the balancing act of my own tendencies, but then like understanding also Tim's tendencies and understanding Jen's tendencies and understanding Jed's tendencies and understanding the Axis team's tendencies, and like getting all those things to synthesize together was I don't want to say it was hard. It was fun. It was a fun challenge to deal with. Working in entertainment, things can take forever, right? Like there's this slog of entertainment. And so I remember in the past when I was working in commercials, I always envied the entertainment world. And I was like, oh, you know, they get to make these long form projects and they get put so much work and effort into it. And I'm just somewhat of I suppose I'll use the word perfection. I like to make sure things are of the highest quality bar I possibly can, you know, in my work. And so I'm sort of relentless in my pursuit of getting there, as long as it doesn't, you know, absolutely kill anybody. But but then having worked in entertainment, there's this, you know, you spend so long, and I've mentioned this multiple times now, you spend so long working through development and things like that to try and get to production that you start to look back and you start to envy the commercial world, where it's like bang, 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 you know, you pitch on something, the money comes in, you start making it a couple days later, you go through the process of all the different stages of production, from storyboarding to visual development to getting things into CG and doing modeling and blocking, animation, layout, all that stuff, effects. And so you start to look back and you're like, oh, I kind of miss doing those things on a daily basis and that kind of like run and gun culture. So the 6 months, although it was extraordinarily short, and I remember taking one of my very first meetings with Jen at Blur. And we were just like, I think maybe it wasn't my first meeting, but maybe we were reviewing our first reel or something like that. And Emily Dean, one of the other directors from Very Pulsive Machine, was there. And she had just wrapped. She had just wrapped her episode and had been working on it, I think, for like 2 years or something like that. Sure, I think hers was quite a long one. But I remember thinking at the time, oh crap, like these directors are finishing their episodes and I'm like just getting started. I've got this super fucking short timeline. That although it was a short timeline, I think the benefit of it is that you just have to go. Like there's no time for everybody to sit around and try a million different things because somebody doesn't think that, somebody has an opinion that, oh, maybe something else is better. Like it just eliminates so much of the hassle of stuff that you do deal with in development, where there's a lot of second guessing and questioning everything all the time, sometimes to a detriment, right? Because it's like, well, if we just continued down a path, you know, we would end up with the result rather than continuing to spin on something forever. So I think it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. You know, people definitely lost some sleep on that project. I'm not going to lie and paint it in any other way, but I think at the end of the day, they're all really proud of what it is, and I'm sure it will do great things for people's confidence and people's careers and all kinds of things in terms of what they put out into the world. So, you know, even though there was some sleepless nights, I think at the end of the day, there was a lot of value that came from having to just get it done on a six month timeline.
It's a passion, you know, like we all signed up for this